Action.
Welcome to another episode of Drunken Medicine. I am so excited to be here again, and we are drunk on medicine and we're passionate about whiskey, among other things, but we're going to say whiskey for today. My name is Mike, and I'm an acupuncturist. I've been practicing for almost 14 years, and I wouldn't say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot. And so, we get to talk a lot from our experience, and I'm just really excited to be here. Dr. May, tell me about yourself.
It does feel like we've seen it all, hasn't
It
it?
does.
Yeah. So, I'm Dr. May. I'm a naturopathic physician. I've been practicing for 13 plus years, just helping people, solve really complicated issues. Mostly now it's endocrine disorders, chronic pain, stuff like that.
Nice. What are you drinking there?
Well, so I'm still working, so I figured probably wouldn't be a good idea to have some whiskey right now. So I'm drinking a turmeric tea. This is
Oh,
I kind of go back and forth between this and a green tea that I like. So I sip on tea throughout the day. It's nice.
I've become a tea snob now. I found a local Chinese tea shop where I do the actual like loose leaf that's shipped in from
Mm.
China that you pour in for 30
Mhm.
seconds and you wash it.
Yep.
My kids love it
Got
too. It's amazing.
got all the good arsenic in it.
Oh, man. Well, that's why you rinse the first one. You don't ever drink the first
Oh,
wash. You rinse the
okay.
first.
Yeah.
You decrease the
Yeah.
arsenic.
Since being here in Montana, I haven't found a good tea shop yet. I really miss Sipping Streams in Fairbanks. Did you ever get tea from them?
I like sipping. I do. I like them a
Yeah,
lot. I like this place better, even though
yeah.
it's pretty bougie. I still really like it.
Okay.
It
All
is.
right,
I mean,
fair
they're
enough.
like, we flew to China before the pandemic and we like talked to the farmers and then we like, and like,
Oh,
I mean, it was that deal. I mean, they actually
yeah,
went to China and sourced the tea. So
nice. Oh, that's cool. That's
you
cool.
pay for it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I bet. I bet. So, what are you drinking today?
I broke the rules, man, like you did too. So I've, I, I have a lot of whiskeys, but I'm almost out of new whiskeys to open. I'm not going to go buy one, but I've got this amazing rum, Diplomatico Reserva Exclusiva. It's very, very good.
Is it exclusive?
No, they just call it that because it's fancy. But
Uh,
for the price point, it's actually one of the best rums I've ever had because it's inexpensive
Yeah.
and
How
it's
much is a
everything you want
bottle?
from a spiced rum.
How much is a bottle?
I think I got this for like 38 bucks
Oh, that's not
for
bad.
a fifth, and
Yeah.
it tastes like $120 rum. It's nice.
Yeah. One of my favorite bourbons is Basil Hayden, and
Mhm.
they have a type that is finished in rum and the rum barrels, and oh man, it's great. It's just like that. It's got this just a little sweet hint to
Yeah,
the back end of it, which is just really nice.
yeah. This tastes like hot butter and spices, like cardamom and like spices and hot butter and
Mm,
like cane sugar. I mean, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Ah, very cool.
Anyways, I love it. It's not whiskey, but I figured y'all wouldn't mind.
Yeah, awesome. So, what are we talking about today, Mike?
Oh, I'm excited about this one because this is something that I see all the time, and it's that time of year. I'll give our audience a hint. When you look outside and it's raining yellow instead of the usual rain, we are talking about allergies today. It's that time of year everywhere. In North Carolina, it is. I bet it is out west. So
Mm.
I'm excited about this one. A lot of people suffer from allergies all the time.
Yeah, for this one, I feel like I should just shut up and sit back and just let you talk the whole time because, man, I have got to say, acupuncture and this, like what you do for like the NAIDS and stuff like that for allergies is just fascinating. And I haven't seen anything compared to it,
Oh,
whether
that's
it's
awesome.
like slit therapy, like the sublingual immunotherapy. That's great, but even that, I haven't seen hold a candle to like the success you've had just in patients that we've shared over the years, for allergies. I mean, we're talking like anaphylactic kind of reactions that come down to a point where people can actually tolerate, whatever that protein was in the first place. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, this is going to be a little of me and a lot of you today, Mike.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. I want to start with you actually, though, because you can start with kind of the Western biomedical, how allergies work, and then we can jump into, the Eastern diagnostics and treatment and all that.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So, what is an allergy? So, an allergy is just your immune system overreacting to a protein, something from your environment. Now, um, it can be sort of pollen, grasses, molds, things like that. It could be food related. Most of us think when we're talking about allergies, we think seasonal allergies. So, some reaction to grasses, molds,
Mhm.
whatever pollen is being produced at the time, or food allergies like a peanut allergy. Okay, so and that makes up what an allergy is. Now there can be some confusion between what an allergy is versus a sensitivity
Oh yeah.
versus an intolerance when it comes to food. So I don't do a lot of the seasonal allergy type stuff besides referring people to, like sublingual immunotherapy or something like that. But the food thing, I do quite a bit, and there's a lot of confusion there. So I kind of wanted to kind of get through that first, and then let you kind of take off with the allergy part.
Hmm.
So the difference between an allergy versus a sensitivity versus an intolerance. So an allergy and a sensitivity are both immune based. So your immune system is reacting to whatever that protein is. Now they're reacting in different ways. A typical allergy is what's called an IgE response. And it's usually pretty immediate. Within a couple of minutes to a couple of hours, you're having a reaction. And generally, it's a pretty strong reaction. So you know what that is. You eat some peanuts and your throat swells up, or you walk outside from being inside all day and you take a sniff of the pollen and you start sneezing, or you get hives. Like that's a pretty immediate reaction. Most people kind of figure that out, or at least they know, like, this time of year I'm going to start suffering.
Hmm.
Now the other one, the sensitivities, those are harder. Those are typically an IgG response, which is the delayed response. That can happen anywhere from 2 to 72 hours after you come into contact with that protein. So that one gets really tricky. You eat something today and it takes 3 days to react to it. And those reactions can be much more subtle. There can be some reflux to sinus congestion to kind of irritable bowel type symptoms or eczema, any of those could be related to this sort of delayed reaction. That was
Hmm.
really tough to kind of pinpoint because of that delay. So sometimes it's nice to get a blood test for that. And the blood tests aren't perfect. There's a lot of confusion about what the blood tests are telling us too. If you go in and get a food sensitivity panel done and it comes back high in, let's say, gluten or eggs or something like that, it's not really telling you that you're actually having a reaction to that food. It's telling you your immune system is responding to that, but it doesn't necessarily tell you if you have a tolerance for that food or if
Hmm.
you're actually having a bad reaction to it. So, the other aspect of that is you actually have to eliminate that food, typically for a month or two, depending on what type of food it is, but usually 4 to 6 weeks, 8 weeks, somewhere in that range. And then so you eliminate it and then you challenge it back. So if your symptoms get better when you eliminate them and then they come back when you challenge them, that's a pretty good positive that you're having a reaction and it's not a tolerance. So
Hmm.
just wanted to kind of clarify that because there's a lot of sort of misinformation and misperceptions about what exactly that's testing for.
Oh yeah, we call
Um,
everything an allergy. I feel like anytime somebody comes in to see me, it's all an
mm,
allergy. It could be
yep. Yeah.
dairy intolerance. It could be a sensitivity, but they're going to call it an allergy, and I'm usually not going to correct them a whole bunch until they kind of get to know me.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like allergy is this big umbrella that everything that you react to, it, kind of falls underneath that umbrella. And that's just technically not correct. But yeah, I
Yeah,
get it. I'm the same way. I usually don't correct it unless we're actually going through test results. And then, I want to educate my patients like, hey, this is exactly what is going on. And this is
yeah,
what we're going to refer to as this as a sensitivity and not a typical allergy. You know.
yeah.
The other thing is intolerances, which are not immune mediated, so it's not a response from your immune system. This is like lactose intolerance, right? So you actually don't make the enough of the enzyme that breaks down the lactase sugar that's in milk. So if you can't break it down, it gets in your gut. There can be bacteria that ferment it, cause gas and bloating and stuff like that. So that's an intolerance. Like you can't break something down because you don't produce enough of the enzyme. And here's a fun fact: only about 35% of the world's population, after the age of about 8, produces enough of the lactase enzyme to break down lactose.
Really? I
So
didn't know
yeah,
that. That's crazy.
yep, yeah, it's not much. So there are a lot of people out there drinking milk that can't actually break it down very well, which can cause all sorts of gut issues.
Now, I'm glad you point that out. I mean, I was thinking about food when you were talking, and one of the reasons it's so hard to identify sensitivities, and I think one of the reasons why we have more sensitivities, is hundreds of years ago you ate what was local to you. You had,
Mhm.
and it was fairly simple food. Like you didn't mix all these crazy things together. Where if you look at the ingredients on an average processed food, and you see 100 different things, if you have issues with any one of those, like it can cause problems. Whereas 300 years ago, you go out to your garden and you have you have some fresh stuff. You got some grain of some kind. You got some vegetables. May have a little bit of meat if you had a good hog that didn't die
Mhm.
terribly. But it was
Mhm.
really simple food. It was simple.
Right.
And now
Yeah.
what we have is not simple at all.
Yeah. And we also, we can eat whatever we want to whenever we want to. So we don't cycle food, like we used to based on the seasons. It's
Yeah.
like, well, typically if you follow the way that harvest goes, in the springtime, you're going to eat a lot of green leafy vegetables. And then later in the summer and in the fall, you're going to get more tubers, more things grown from the ground, right? And so it's like we don't cycle our food that way. We can eat whatever we want to year round. So we've lost some diversity there and some cycling of our food choices, which yeah,
Right.
I think absolutely you're right. It affects the way that our immune system, you know, deals with these proteins that it's seeing.
Yeah, and Chinese medicine is the same thing. If you look at the dietary cycle in Chinese medicine and you look at how the organs line up with the seasons, it's always based on, what you were able to eat. So liver time is that springtime when everything's flourishing. And so the end of spring, what are you eating? You're eating nice leafy greens. And during winter, you're supposed to eat in Chinese medicine a lot of bone broths and potatoes and starches. And it makes
Mhm.
sense from a cyclical point of view of exactly what you'd be eating at these different times of year.
Mm. Yep.
And you're right. Now
Yep.
it's just like, I want a coconut. Well, you live in Alaska. Doesn't matter. I want a coconut.
Right. Right. I know.
I'm getting my
It's like
coconut.
I still chuckle, like, especially when I lived in Alaska. That's going and grabbing a banana in December. I'm like, all right, you've never been able to do something like this before. Just 100 years ago. So
We forget how things have changed. But I really do, I can't put my finger on it scientifically, but I really do think that it contributes to a lot of the sensitivities as well as overeating of certain things where we're just exposing ourselves over and over and over again to gluten,
hmm
6 times a day or whatever,
hmm
over years and years and years mixed with bad lifestyle.
yeah, plus too, all the other things that go into just being healthy. So like stress, all the things that can affect your gut health, like our poor diet, we're not moving enough, we're stressed, we're not sleeping well. All that stuff affects your gut health. And when your gut's a mess, then you're going to overreact to things more. So this whole sort of idea of like leaky gut or intestinal permeability, like when things leak through, like these proteins, because of damage to the cells in the gut, then remember it's like 80% of your immune system is right there on the other side, right? And so it's going to see these proteins that are leaking through that shouldn't be there. And it's going to react to those proteins. And it's going to
Yep.
create these memory cells, these antibodies to those proteins so that it can identify it again. So if you're reacting to this gluten protein, and then your body is seeing that gluten protein 3 times a day, every day, then yeah, you're going to create even more damage to the gut, and you're going to create this sort of vicious cycle of more damage means more reaction of your immune
Mhm.
system, and it just snowballs from there.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that because, again, I say this every week, but it's true. I want everybody to know this is that there's so many similarities with Western medicine and Eastern medicine. It's just different terms. And when you were
Mhm.
saying that, it made me think of exactly that because you talked a little bit about, from the Western perspective, what it is, an actual allergy is, and your exposure. In Eastern medicine, it's actually very similar. Basically, they believe that you have kind of a defensive barrier. Like you have your immune system is kind of like they actually look at it as external, like an external defensive barrier that keeps things
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
So they call it the lungs, but it's actually also attached to the skin. So your lungs and skin are attached as part of the immune response to keep bad things out.
That makes sense, dude. It's exactly the same types of cells, these
Yep.
epithelial cells. They're the same exact ones from your skin that are in your gut. So
Mhm.
it's still part of the sort of the outside, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's
That's the same
exactly what
types
it
of
is.
cells.
It's part of that
Yeah.
outside. So they see as like, okay, you're protecting yourself. And when you get allergies, it's not just an invasion. They look at it as an invasion. Like if you were to have and they looked at everything from a naturalistic perspective. So you have an invading army come in and take
Mhm.
over your stuff. And you beat them back over and over again. But eventually the army gets in. That's what they look at it as. It's this repeated exposures to pollen and things. And
Mhm.
eventually your body's finally like, whatever, like I'm going to lose this battle. You're getting in.
Mhm.
And that's a wind invasion is what they would call it. And so,
Interesting. Hmm.
yeah, basically it's a failure of kind of the fail safes in your body to be able to keep it out.
I mean, it definitely correlates with what we see from sort of a biochemical stance of like what we actually know happens in the gut. That's what happens. It does.
Mhm.
There's only so much that your those cells can take, and when they're being affected by other factors like stress, then yeah, the dominoes fall pretty
Yep.
quickly.
And stress is another part of it that can really weaken the lungs in Eastern medicine. So again, it goes right along with it. If you have that stress, the liver qi stagnation, it goes in and it can attack the lungs. And so at the beginning, it's just the lungs. So I haven't actually talked about kidneys yet, which
I
I'm.
was going to say,
But
when's the kidney
but guess
coming
what
in?
happens whenever it gets worse? It affects the kidneys because it's immunity. Kidneys are immunity, which makes sense. Kidneys in Eastern medicine also have to do with bone and marrow. And so you run into some immune response stuff. So basically, if it gets deep enough for long enough, everything will affect the kidney eventually in Eastern
Hmm.
medicine. Everything.
Hmm.
But
It sounds like it.
yeah, so it starts at the lung.
If I were taking a test, I would just answer kidney for everything.
And you'd probably be right.
I would.
One of my teachers, I'm not going to try to mimic his English, but he always talks about the kidney. The kidney is everything. The kidney.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what it sounds
Um,
like.
but yeah, it's very similar. One of the differences is we don't really look at allergies and sensitivities particularly different. Like from Western perspective, we do because we know the Western perspective. But from an ancient perspective, it's still an invasion that you're having a reaction to. And so you're probably going to treat it close to the same way. The exception is if it's a really severe allergy where you're getting, um, severe swelling, severe redness, like those kind of things, then it will change the diagnosis some, but you're still going to treat it in a lot of the same ways.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And so they actually didn't have a word for allergy per se, but they have a Chinese word for stuffy nose, basically. BUN is just like stuffy nose. But they
Hmm.
mix that with the immune response, and that's what we look at as allergy is like, okay, here's the symptom at the end. If you're having, now this isn't for digestion is a little different, but if you're
I was
having,
just about to ask that. Yeah.
yeah,
Like, how's a food allergy? Is that different than sort of pollen or environmental allergen?
it is. They still look at it as a failure of basically your defensive energy to keep things out, but they look at it as attacking different organs. It attacks your digestive system as opposed to the lungs and kidneys.
Hmm. Okay.
And really, they do look at it as invasion. I mean, because almost everything we talk about is how we interact with nature, and then they basically put themselves into how our bodies interact within itself, how we interact with nature. Okay, how do we compare this disease? Well, remember when that invading army came in and they took over and a bunch of people died? We eventually got them out. That makes sense when you're looking at this condition. And so they just took what they saw, and then they put their medicine in with that. And it's really cool if you think about it, because it's all observational of what you see, what's around you.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like Chinese medicine has done a much better job at observation than we actually do today. If we didn't have ways to test things and
Mm-hmm.
machines and lab tests and things like that we just wouldn't be that good because we don't observe well.
I agree. And I had teachers that could look at your tongue and feel your pulse, and it was like magic. They would just do
Mhm.
it, and they'd be like, "Yeah, this is what's wrong with you. This is what's going on." You're like, "Yep, that's exactly it." And it's just observation, because they didn't have the
Yeah.
diagnostic testing.
I'm blown away nowadays, like how little physical exams are done.
Mm.
I'll have a patient come in and ask them questions about, their gut or whatever, their heart, and ask them when's the last time, their primary care listened to their gut and palpated their stomach and, things like that. And it's rare now. Like
Yep.
I find, granted, it's, you don't have a lot of time and like urgent care meetings or your primary care or whatever it might be. So there's not a lot of time to do a lot of physical exam, but it's become a lost art, I feel like.
It is. And I think it's something we can really learn from ancient medicine in general, is the art of observation, and truly seeing your patient and truly listening to your patient. Like you're actually seeing them and hearing them. Because I feel like a lot of times when you go to the doctor, because it's so busy, like they don't actually see or hear you.
Mhm.
You're the back pain patient
Mhm.
that, okay, I've seen a million back pain patients, and now you're the back
Mhm.
pain patient, and they're like, yeah, your back hurts. Like, how about we try this med? Let me know how you
Yep.
feel.
Right. We classify them based on a diagnosis, not who they are.
Exactly. And allergies are the same thing. I'll have some people come in and I'll ask about allergy testing, and like, oh yeah, I had that scratch test and it said I was fine.
Mhm.
Okay. Have you ever had any sensitivity testing? What's that? Okay, you
Mhm.
haven't. But if you ask a lot of, not everyone, but a lot of allergists, they'd be like, well, we're focusing on allergies, like you talked about, the IgE response. You're having this,
Mhm.
we scratch you with this. Oh, look, you have a welt. Like you have an allergy.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas with sensitivities, it's a lot more touchy, and that's where people tend to come to me, and we start talking about the wacky things that I do with diagnostics with allergies that make no sense whatsoever to people.
Yeah, let's talk about those wacky things, Mike. So what would you do if someone came in this time of year, which I'm sure you've already had, and said they're pretty reactive to pollen and other things, potentially some food as well.
So, I would ask a ton of questions about what their exposures were as a kid. Did you have childhood asthma that went away? It's a big question that people forget to ask.
Hmm.
Happens a lot where people have these severe reactions, they almost forget about, they go away and they think it's gone. And then when they become an adult, all of a sudden it's still an issue. It's just a lot lower level of an issue that's not causing this severe reaction.
Hmm.
So I'll ask about that. I'll ask about their diet a lot, because and a lot of times they'll lie to me at first, and then they get to know me. Everybody lies about their diet in America. If you ask somebody about their diet, they're going to lie about something.
Yeah, I feel like House was correct about that. Everyone lies, every
Yeah,
patient lies about something at least.
about something that they're embarrassed about. Is like they don't want to admit that they eat like a gallon of ice cream like once
Uh-huh.
a week on Sunday night when they're watching, whatever. But
Right.
so I'll try to get to the bottom of exactly what their exposures are. I'll check their pulse, I'll check their tongue, I'll ask if they've had testing. If not, I'll usually refer them to you if I'm around you,
Mhm.
or to a naturopath who can run some testing. And then I'll do something wacky that I still don't completely understand kinesiology muscle testing, where I'll
Mhm.
actually go through and test for a lot of different sensitivities. I don't get it, but it works. It's wild.
I gotta tell you, this is where you lost me when we worked together. I'm like, all right, man, the woo woo factor on this is really high. I don't know if I could. I can't wrap my sort of logical brain around how this works.
I don't
But
either. I don't either, honestly.
yeah, yeah, and knowing you too, like your brain's the same way. Like you're very logical and evidence based. So just to see you doing this made me curious, and then to see the results that from patients that we shared, and there's no way that that could just be placebo based to
Mhm.
see the percentage of people who responded so positively. So it made me a believer, but again, it's still the woo woo factor is way up there for this.
And if people were to ask me, and for one thing, you know this about me, Ash, but a lot of people who listening probably don't know. I'm one of the least woo-woo acupuncturists I ever met.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
not. And
yeah.
so I mean, I've had some acupuncturists that don't even think that I'm like a very valid acupuncturist because I'm so far on the not woo side of just I'm just not. Like that's not how my
Yeah.
brain works. I want to understand exactly how something works and we'll go into it later, but there's all kinds of studies about how the acupuncture side works for this. Like we have studies, we know what things are getting decreased, we know what's happening. With this stuff, I have no idea because the whole idea is, okay, you become weak to some kind of substance that you're not even directly exposed to. Like it's in a vial or it's in a baggie.
Right.
Like it's not like direct exposure, and your muscles will actually get weak to it. Now, if you were to ask me to posit, like, well, why is that? I think that on some level, subconsciously, there's a lot more going on than what we understand. We don't understand a lot about the brain. I think that subconsciously, somewhere our mind, from like a Western perspective, somewhere our mind knows what we're getting exposed to is bad for our health and it affects our body. That's what I think is actually
Hmm.
happening.
Hmm. Or it could be something like with homeopathy. I feel like there's some people who really, really believe in homeopathy, and again, that's another one that I can't quite get my logical mind around. But I feel like understanding quantum physics and
Yep,
how it works better may actually explain how homeopathy works and maybe how like kinesiology and muscle testing works.
I
I don't
agree.
know.
I agree completely.
Maybe it's at that level where we can't actually perceive it very well.
But I
That
do
is
think there's
fascinating.
something to it, and I don't think it's just magic. I think there's something physical in the physical world that makes
Yeah.
this work because I've seen it work thousands and thousands of times. So, anyways, I'll go through a whole bunch of different substances. I'll muscle test for all of them. I'll write them down, and then there's the hard part. And you've done this, I'm sure, with allergy stuff as well. It takes a lot of treatments. The more allergies and sensitivities people have, the more treatments it's going to take. They're going to see me.
Yeah.
They're going to become friends with me because we're going to see each other for months.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it with any allergy treatment. Even if you go in to get injections, that can take years sometimes to get to a point where you're not reacting. Or even the the sublingual immunotherapy. I mean, you're looking at a minimum 90 days for that. So
Yeah.
it's like 3 months at minimum, sometimes longer, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's year after year. You have to come in before allergy season starts to start your treatment so that you don't respond to that. You know?
Yep. And I tell people expect at least 20 visits, but the results that I see. So I'll do the muscle testing, and then you'll actually do spinal stimulation where you do massage or massage gun or activator gun up and down the spine and actually
Hmm.
hit every single spinal nerve over and over again, at least 5 times up and down. That's
Why is
an
that?
essential part of the treatment. I
Yeah.
again, now it's funny. This is called NAET. It's an allergy elimination technique. If you were to ask the person who founded it why you do that, she said because you do it. Which is a very Eastern answer.
Yeah.
My guess is all those nerve roots and nerve bundles connect to different organs at each of the spinal levels, and so I think that you're actually making sure to connect to every part of the internal what's going on in the body is what I think is happening.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because the nervous system. is, linked to the immune system, right?
Yep.
So our nervous system is our sensory organ, right? So it's telling us what the environment is doing. And so that can be the case with your immune system as well. Your nervous system tells your immune system what to do, how to react.
Yep.
So it would make sense that you would have some type of spinal root
Yep.
stimulation. Yeah.
And then you do acupuncture. You do acupuncture on specific points that make a lot of sense. I mean, they're points for, helping the immune system push out invasion. They're points for strengthening the immune system, and points for inflammation. There's a point for inflammation that you do. It's the best in the body for inflammation. And again, that makes sense from a logical point of view. You do them in a certain order. Why? I don't know. You do it like you do it in like a circle because she said so. And if you ask her why, she'd be like, "Oh, it's because I said so." Like,
so are there any samurai techniques or anything? I feel like there should be some really good Chinese names for, actually samurai is Japanese, isn't it? But
well, there's
anyway,
also Japanese acupuncture too, though.
yeah, that's true. So are there any really really cool names for some of these techniques or treatments?
No, I mean it's all just kind of funny. It's like releasing wind is one of the big one, which everybody always thinks of as farting, but that's not farting. you're releasing wind. Now you can always say cool stuff though, like I'm strengthening the lung Wei Qi. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
It's really just strengthening immune response and strengthening people pushing it out. But it's interesting what you treat too, because you treat what shows up as weak, but you also treat certain things in everybody no matter what. Like you just assume everybody has an issue with sugars and processed foods. Everyone.
Yep.
And you treat it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, sugar just wrecks your immune system in a lot of ways. It suppresses it. It causes certain aspects of it to overreact. So yeah, that completely makes sense.
Now I'm going to go even more woo-woo with you here. Sorry, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole. But I've even treated people like there's allergies and sensitivities, but there's also an emotional aspect. And I think we even had a shared patient. I don't know if you remember this patient, but this patient was known for being an absolute terror to the front desk, an absolute terror. Like they dreaded this patient coming in. And they told me they had an issue with a certain person in their life. And I'm like, well, let's treat it. And so, they muscle tested, it showed up weak. And like he treated it like an allergy, even though it was this person. And I didn't think anything of it. They came in the next visit, happy, smiling. Like, oh, that's cool. And then the front desk actually approached me later and like, what'd you do? Like, what do you mean what I do? Like, this has never happened. Like, whatever you did, just keep doing that. Like, who knows what happened? Again, it could have been a quantum thing. I don't know. But it's crazy. It's just how the body reacts. And I think there's a connection between mind and body and how we react to things.
Yeah, no, that's wild, man. Yeah.
And there's also avoiding. That's the big thing. So it's kind of the same thing you do. There's elimination where it's like, while we're doing this, you don't need to be eating these things that are going to set you off until we're done with treatments, period. And then you slowly add them back in so that we know if something didn't hold or didn't work right, so that we don't end up like, okay, well, I don't know what you reacted to because you just threw in everything at once.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. Like a lot of this is just decreasing the load on your system. So if we know that you're reacting, if it's pollen outside, we want to decrease the load on your immune system while we're working on that. So, this is a time where if you come in from being outside, you immediately strip off your clothes, you go take a shower, you do the nasal lavages to just rinse out all that pollen from your nasal passages. So again, we're decreasing the load, that we're putting on your body. And then, having an air purifier in your bedroom. So it's, filtering out all the pollen inside your bed. So at least you're sleeping with a really low load over the night. So everything you can do there to sort of decrease that load. And then you start working on Then you work on how the body's reacting to that. So if this is an IgE reaction, it's a lot of histamine. So you start using mast cell stabilizers, which are the cells that produce histamine. So you're using your quercetins and your vitamin C and stuff like that to help keep again the histamine level, that load down, so that they're not reacting as much. So it's all a process, right?
Yep.
It's all trying to decrease their load and treat their immune system at the same time, so that it's not going to overreact.
And, same thing with acupuncture. The NAAT, I think, works on many levels, but there's been great studies with acupuncture, double-blind studies showing, decreases in allergies. They found decreases in blood eosinophil counts, decreases in serum IgE levels from before to after acupuncture compared to the control group. These were double-blind controlled, really good studies. Decreases in interleukin 10 in people with chronic allergies. So there's biochemical stuff that's happening even with just acupuncture that's pretty phenomenal.
Wow, that's cool. So it's just like, I feel like our science is just keep catching up to, what acupuncture has been doing for a couple thousand years.
And a lot of allergists I've met are actually really open to it because they'll do the allergy shots. I had a patient that had allergy shots for years and they improved by about 50%, which is great. And then after they saw me, they improved to about 90% total from what they were. And so the allergist was really happy because we only got him 50% of the way there. I don't know what you did and how it worked, but it did.
Yeah. Great. I feel like there's a lot of that going on with us. I don't know how it works. It works, so just keep doing it.
There was actually, for the allergy elimination technique, they actually had to fund the study themselves because nobody would fund it through a university. And then, made sure they didn't have any part of it because then there's bias. They just did the funding and here's what we want done. And they did peanut anaphylactic allergies in kids with NAET and had significant changes where kids could have peanuts again. I'm not telling you to do this at home. Listen, do not do this. Right. Do not do this. But there was a study and it's crazy. It's like almost every kid was able to eat peanuts with mild to moderate reactions after the study, where they were having anaphylactic reactions where you have to have the EpiPen, very dangerous. And this was in a controlled hospital setting, but it still was absolutely incredible. So, it works. It's nuts.
Yeah. You don't see dangerous studies like that done very often.
This was 20 years ago. I don't think you could do it now.
Yeah, I was going to say, small kids and pregnant women, those are just two classes you don't really mess with.
Yeah, this was years ago. Now you would never get that study past anyone.
Yeah. Huh.
But so tell me, so I've talked a lot about treatment. Sorry, I've been talking a while. Tell me about your treatment. So you were talking about quercetin, vitamin C. Is that kind of where you tend to go?
Yeah. So if we're looking at an IgE response, then you want those mast cell stabilizing, compounds like quercetin and vitamin C. So there's a great product. We don't have any sponsors or anything, so I'm gonna throw product names out there. I don't care.
Yes.
But DHIST by Orthomolecular Products is a great one that has a good combination that I often use, and they have a kids formula too that works really well. So it's basically that in combination with all the avoidance type stuff, taking the clothes off, showering, doing the neti pot rinses, using a HEPA filter in your bedroom, those sorts of things. If it's food related, and we're talking about more like the sensitivities stuff, even the IgE allergies too, that goes to really working on the gut. So we're gonna I usually do a 6 to 8 week program where we're sort of gut restoring, right? So we're adding things in to try to increase resiliency in the gut. So, and to decrease the sort of intestinal permeability there. So we're using, good types of probiotics, and there's some great studies on the use of probiotics in reducing allergies or those responses. And that's both IgE and the IgG, the delayed response as well. So probiotics are great. I feel like all of us probably need probiotics because most of us have poor nutrition, and we don't eat fermented food very much as a culture. So we don't have ways of getting that stuff in. Our kids don't eat dirt anymore, and probably a good reason because
my daughter does.
Our dirt's probably nastier than it used to be, but I don't. But anyway, we don't inoculate our GI tract like we used to as well. It's like at birth, as it sounds kind of bad, but as the baby comes down the vaginal canal, that's his first inoculation of probiotics. It actually ingests, lactobacillus and some other bugs. And then when breastfeeding, they also ingest more probiotics that way.
Hmm.
So if you have a kid and that was born by C-section and then didn't breastfeed at all, you've just destroyed like their first actions of inoculation. And those are the kids we do end up seeing have a higher prevalence of allergies
Interesting.
as kids and as adults. So, having good gut health early on really helps to offset some of that. But, if somebody comes in and their gut's a mess and they're having allergies, that's a great place to start just to try to solidify, their gut health a little bit better. And it doesn't take much. Some probiotics, some good products like glutamine and some other things to, some zinc carnosine, stuff like that, that helps to restore and heal some of the damage in the gut. If you do that, then you build resiliency there in the gut. If you have good resiliency in your gut, you're going to have good resiliency everywhere else too. So there's kind of an old adage, that we learned in school pretty early on, is when in doubt, treat the gut. So, and that totally makes sense. We'd see people come in and they're just a complete mess. There's just on tons of medication. They have a laundry list of conditions and issues. And you're asking yourself, like, man, where do I start here?
Yeah.
And I've gone back to that old adage time and time again of just starting with the gut. And allergies is no different.
Yep. And it makes me think of the whole food as medicine too.
Mm-hmm.
Of like you're talking about probiotics and what we eat. And one of my favorite teas and Chinese teas, this will gross people out if they haven't ever had it, is a good pu'er tea. Have you ever had a good pu'er tea? Pu'er tea. No,
Okay, you got to stop saying that.
pu'er tea. Come on. Anyways, it's a fermented tea, and they just let it ferment for years in a cave. If you can't listen, he's cracking up right now.
Oh, sorry, man. That just hit me.
Actually, the way it smells, you
Uh,
could go there. No, but
okay.
really, like you let it
You're not
ferment.
making a
You let
good
it
case
sit.
here, Mike.
You let it sit and you let it ferment. I had one the other day that somebody broke out that was a 30-year. It had been fermenting for 30
Oh,
years.
oh, that doesn't sound good.
And they said, "Oh, this is going to taste unique." And like the ones that have been
Yeah.
fermented a couple of years, it's that nice fermentation of like if you've ever had like like a good fermentation where it's like it's a little skunky but it's still good. This
Yeah.
tasted like if you were licking a library from the 1800s. It's
Mm,
like old
mm.
moldy books from the 1800s, and you're just licking the
Oh,
pages. That's what the tea tasted like.
oh, again, not a glowing
I'm
review.
selling it. No, but my point is that like you're getting exposed to these different natural probiotics as
Yeah.
part of the culture, and we just don't culture. Sorry, that was kind of punny. But we don't have that anymore very much unless you use
Yeah.
sauerkraut.
Yeah, you're right. And we don't have a lot of variation. Like I have this conversation a lot. It's try to eat a large variety of fermented foods. Don't just stick with one like yogurt. Have kimchi and kombucha and miso and all the different
And
types of
pu'er tea.
and pu'er tea. Yeah.
Now, if you get a chance though, try one that's been fermented a couple years. It's actually really nice.
Huh. All
Don't go
right.
30 years. Too
Can we
much.
chase it with some whiskey? Would that be
No,
good?
you're supposed to just drink it warm and
Ah,
straight.
dang. All
And
right.
no sugar. You
No
don't add sugar
sugar?
to Chinese tea. It's literally just tea.
Man, you're killing me here.
I like your treatment though. Do you ever use stinging nettle for anything?
Yeah, nettles are great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nettles are, I think nettles are in that dehist formula that I recommended as well. But yeah,
Oh, cool.
nettles, quercetin, vitamin C, bromelain. I mean, there are a lot of really great ones. I find the formulas are a little bit better than doing the straight herbs.
Yeah.
But if you had to do one single herb, I would go with nettles. Yeah.
And that's actually, I kind of do the same thing you do. So when I'm treating people with the allergy elimination and the acupuncture, because it takes a while, I also give them something to knock down the symptoms basically while we're going through the treatment.
Yeah.
So it'll usually be a formula like that with nettle in it, quercetin, something like that. There's also a really good Chinese herbal formula that's basically a natural antihistamine is what I call it. I mean, it's like if you were just to take an antihistamine, but it's all natural herbs. It has the same effects. It has the same antihistamine effects. It's one of the formulas is called BNPN, which just means stuffy nose formula. That's the literal translation.
Yeah.
There's another one that's called Song Ursan. That's my favorite. You're not supposed to take it long term because it's a really strong antihistamine. But when I'm treating people who have these acute sinusitis, like rhinitis or sinus issues, really good at drying everything out. It's considered slightly toxic, which when you hear that in Chinese medicine, it's not like, oh my gosh, it's going to poison and kill you. They look at anything that could have potential harm on the body over a period of time to be toxic.
Oh, okay. That's a good.
So they would say it's slightly
definition.
toxic.
Well, I mean, everything is toxic depending on dose, right? So that makes sense. Like water can be toxic if given at the right dose. So
almost every Western medicine they would consider slightly toxic. Like acetaminophen would be slightly toxic because of what it does to your liver. So
hey, it's still the number one cause of liver failure in America every year.
No.
So yeah.
Really?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. Tylenol overdosing. It seems innocuous because you can get it at over the counter at a pharmacy, but yeah, it's pretty serious stuff.
So we're not going to be advertising for them anytime soon. I agree.
No.
But yeah, I go with the Chinese herbal formula while we're doing that, and then I reevaluate regularly, and the results are ridiculous. I've had a few people over the years who haven't responded to the regimen that I do, but the vast majority respond.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been blown away. Like I remember one of the docs that we worked with had anaphylactic shock when bitten by a mosquito.
Oh.
And if you live in Fairbanks, Alaska, there's tons of mosquitoes there. So this is like it's just a death warrant. But using the NAITs like this gets where he could actually tolerate being bitten several times. I was blown away. And I've seen that, time and time again. So I'm a believer, even though again, the woo-woo factor is way up there.
And he talks like you do too, because he would always tell people like, Mike, I don't know how this works, but it did. So I'll send people to you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And, that's just like that's part of it is our ego too, of, needing to know exactly how things work in order to validate them. And sometimes it's not possible given, the information that we have right now.
Yeah. And a good doctor is curious, but you have to know like when to be curious and when to just say, the patient's feeling better. Like, just let them feel better.
Right. Like sometimes who cares what did it, right? As long as the end result was positive and that's what you were shooting for, like, okay, who cares? It's nice to know so that you can apply that information to future patients. But, in the end, if it works, it works.
And think about how many patients we had that we shared that came in for allergies or sensitivities. And I would hear it over and over again. Like, well, I don't know what it is that's working, but I'm feeling better. And like, it's probably everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And it was just hard because sort of in our Western model, it's very much algorithmic and sort of equation based, right? If this, then that. So if you have this condition, you get this medication and for this outcome sort of thing. We do research the same way, which makes sense. Like we want to know like what this one thing, what sort of outcome it has, and what it's doing. But oftentimes, in my experience, I found like it's not one thing that's going to help improve, someone's condition. It's use of multiple things at the same time. And do we know like what percentage of each one is involved in moving the needle the right direction? No, but that's sort of the art of medicine now as well, is just knowing what to do and sometimes throwing the kitchen sink at them and hopefully something sticks. But it doesn't sound like it's a like I said, a very good equation type system, like we're kind of accustomed to, but it
Yep.
works. It does.
Yep. And a lot of it depends on severity. I mean, I had a failure to thrive patient who was a teenager who couldn't eat almost anything. They could eat 4 or 5 foods daily, and that's it. Like, I mean, literally could not go outside of that. And I had to treat them for a long time. And they saw a significant difference, but it was slow. They were doing all these different things. So, the mom just kept being like, I don't know what's working. Like, is it your thing? Is it everything else? Like, it's everything. Just keep doing it. It's working. Like,
Yeah,
don't
right.
don't
Right.
stop. Just poor
Don't
kid.
stop. Don't deviate from the plan until we get there.
Because I mean, when you can only eat, 5 foods, you're going to run into some serious problems because then you're getting overexposure to those few foods that you're actually eating.
Yep. Yeah. And you get malnourished, you get nutrient deficiencies, that can come into play. Yeah.
Yeah. And this for anybody listening, like this wasn't just like, oh, I don't feel well. This was like physical reactions. This was, extreme physical reactions, digestive issues, rashes, that kind of stuff. So this isn't just subjective. This was actually, somebody having severe issues with these foods and no doctors could figure out what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we see a lot of that, just people come in so miserable and inflamed. And again, you're like, all right, where do I start here? And that's
Yep.
where you have to throw a lot of different things, Adam.
So I'm sure we'll have another allergy episode, but I have one more question for you before we finish up. What is your opinion on antihistamines, Benadryl or Zyrtec, whatever?
Yeah. So again, they're band-aids, right? So they're just mitigating some of the response that your immune system's having to those proteins. So to help people function, yeah, that's fine. Like if I'm using sort of natural antihistamines or those mast cell stabilizers, like we talked about with the quercetin and nettles and everything, and that's not helping, then we can throw in some antihistamines during the day or at nighttime to help them sleep. But again, it's a band-aid, right? It's not actually getting at the root cause. I will throw in too, if you've got a lot of sinus congestion and you're trying to sort of dry things up with an antihistamine, be very careful. You could cause a sinus infection because now you've sort of dehydrated all that mucus in the sinuses, which can catch bacteria more easily and then cause a secondary sinus infection from that. So be careful with the antihistamines for that reason. I like using those nasal lavages, the flushes, a little bit better just to get that stuff moved out instead of just trying to thicken the mucus and sort of dehydrate the fluid from. So it helps with the runny nose, but the consequence of that could be a sinus infection.
Yeah, I'm careful for the same reasons with that Chinese herbal formula I was telling you about, that I keep it short term because it really, really dries things out. So in the short term, people feel great. But then because of our society, most people are like, well, if I feel great now, I'm just going to take it every day for the rest of my life and feel
Yeah.
really great.
Right. And that's how this usually works, right? I mean, the same as when we talk about chronic pain, using NSAIDs versus, herbal anti-inflammatories. Like the herbal anti-inflammatories are great long term, and so they're a great foundation to use because they have minimal, if not any, side effects. Whereas the over-the-counter strong stuff like NSAIDs, or in this case, antihistamines, they're great to use with flare-ups or when things are really miserable, but they're meant to use short term and not for the long term, like the herbal remedies would be.
Oh man, I cannot believe it's been almost an hour. What a great show. But you have anything
I
else you
know,
want to say
yeah.
about allergies at this point?
No, I wish that we could show, like you could show people what you do with the NAIDS and the acupuncture, because I think it's worth
That's
being able
actually a good
to see
idea.
that. Yeah.
In the future, I
Yeah.
think I should do some video clips if I have permission from somebody, just so
Yeah.
people can see it and then post it up. I think it'd be great on our YouTube.
Absolutely, man. I think
And if you're
I'd
not
like to
following
see
our
it myself.
YouTube, it's drunkenmedicine@gmail.com. Follow us.
Yes. Good one there.
Well, hey man, this is a great show. I think it went really well. I know we're going to be talking about allergies more in the future, but since we're getting on, I think we should probably close it up.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. We'll be back here next week. I think next week we're going to talk about high blood pressure, which
Oh,
I'm really stoked to jump into because it's still huge. I mean, they call it the silent killer for a reason. So we're just not doing our due diligence to try to treat it.
yeah.
Anyway,
And if you let it go, it can be a real headache. So,
all right, that's a good place to end. We'll see you guys
hey,
next week.
hey, see y'all next week. Thanks a lot.